Good morning, everyone. So, today is our scheduled online meeting for our subject. So, this is a continuation of the uploaded, or this is the discussion of the uploaded module from our LMS. So, if you haven't read it yet, uh, I would like to apologize for making it contain several pages, but I already include that for 2 weeks, so siguro I think that's enough to time to read. So I don't want to split the contents kasi it maybe baka di masyadong masundan. So the contents of the module provides us the idea how to write variables, the syntax, how to what operations, and how to display output from our C# program. Okay. So today our objective is or are the following. Number one, we'll be distinguishing the difference between variables, constants, and controls. Okay, so how do we create them? What are the characteristics of the variables between constants? Although if you have background in C++, this will not take long, and this would be lesser effort because I think you're familiar already with C++. I'm going to demonstrate differentiate the difference among those data types for C#, apply naming convention, incorporating standards, indicating data type. Although I have already provided discussion with C++ regarding naming convention, but there are also a number of students who doesn't really apply those conventions. So maybe this time they will remember the discussion. So declare variables and constants and select appropriate scope for a variable. Convert a text input to numeric values. Since we will be using the text box, so the data coming from the text box is considered to be string. So whether you input a numeric data such as integer or double, but when your C# retrieve the data coming from text boxes, the C# language consider the content of those text box as string. So we need to convert that to proper data type for better manipulation. Okay. Also, how do we perform calculations using variables and constants, and how do we convert numeric data type using implicit and explicit conversion? It's like what we do in C++. We have static casting, something like that. Use the round decimal values using decimal.round method. Sometimes you need to round off the values of the decimal. Also, format values for output using the string method. So when you display data in your form or text boxes, you are going to convert that into proper format, like do we need to apply comma if it reaches thousands or 100,000, so on, and display two decimals, or how many decimals that you would like. So it depends upon your needs. Okay, so part of the discussion of today's part of the topic of today's discussion is the implementation of a simple application. So this is an ABC store. So as you can see, we have a form that accepts three inputs. So the product name, the price, the quantity. So when the user clicks the button compute, so it will automatically generate an output that shows the user the outcome of the calculation. So the subtotal, okay, the tax, and the total, which is combining that subtotal and the tax. Okay, so this is a very simple program, and I believe you will be enjoying this session. This is just a basic implementation. So if you have time to take some notes, please take some notes. Although this video is recorded, it's really important that when you write those notes, mas malalo nyo siyang maintindihan at matatandaan if you write those things in your notebook. Okay? So, let us continue. Okay. Now let me right now I did not prepare PowerPoint presentation. Okay, but in today's session, I'm presenting the module. Okay. Okay. So ito na siya. Okay. So this is the module for week 7. So although it's very late, but you know, it's better late than never. So okay, so in this particular module, nakikita po ba siya? Nakikita po ba?
Yes, sir.
Nababasa niyo po ba ang content? Readable
Opo.
ba? Okay, thank you. Okay, so to start with this module, so meron tayo ditong discussion. So how do we declare variables in C#? But before we do that, mamaya ipipresent ko siya. So when you declare variables, it's important to describe why do we need to create variables. So it's just like what we do in C++. We create variable to store data coming from the user input, coming from the outcome of any expression. We use variable to store the data that we need to display later for the user's purpose. So that's the use of variable. So it's the location of our data that holds by the computer's memory. Now, it's really important to describe what this data is all about. Let's say, for example, I'm going to ask the user to input a numeric data. What type of data this numeric is all about? Is it integer or double? So we have what we call data type. Okay? So a data type is a type of data a variable can hold. So in C#, we have number of data type that we can use. We have Boolean. Okay? So Boolean holds true or false. So you can use the prefix BLN to, when you create variable, it's really important that you include the type of that particular variable so that you will remember, this variable pala is a decimal type, so therefore this will hold decimal point. So para magkaroon ngayon ng kung parang recognition of the type of variable that you are using. Okay, for example, BLN is numeric, something like that, or is okay, something like that. So it's really important that you write this one. And besides, when you write the data type prefix of the variable, it will be easier for C++ to recognize, most especially when you write that code into your Visual Studio. Okay, so byte, so 0 to 255 of data character, date and time. So it holds the date as well as the time, including the seconds, milliseconds. We have decimal. So decimal, this type of data holds fractions such as dollars or cents or precisions or any monetary data. So it only holds 28 digits. Okay, so if ever you need to store large amount of data, doon na kayo papasok kay double. Okay, so we have float that holds 6 digits of data. So when you need to multiply the size of that, you can use double. Okay, so up to 14 digits. We have short, we have integer. So the difference between the decimal, float, double to other type, this type of data type contains decimal, while short, int, and long holds whole numbers, positive and negative. Okay, so that's the difference of that those data types. So whenever you do or perform calculation, always take consideration of those decimal points if needed. We have string and object. Okay, so there are two types of variable. We have okay, let me scroll back up. Okay, so we have two types. So the ordinary variable, which you declare in your program, and the constant variable, which is this type of variable is allows you to initialize data, but you cannot change the value of it into your memory. So that's what it's called constant. So hold data that cannot change during execution. So it is being used for a special purpose, like you need to create a variable that always use that type of data. So it's very useful. Okay, so when you declare a variable or name constant, okay, so the C# preserves an area of that variable in a memory. So when you create a variable name, we call that identifier. Okay, but when you create a variable, make sure that the identifier is descriptive. So it requires that when you declare variable, the name of the variable is parang it's a descriptive naming convention. When you say descriptive naming, you name the variable of that variable's purpose. Okay, so declaration statement. So we have to establish project variables in constant, give variables a constant name, specify type of data, and the variable is not executable. Okay, so how do we declare variables? In C#, we declare variable like this way. So we need to type first the data type followed by the variable name. Okay, so example, by the way, this should be written as str name, not name string. So hindi ko na palitan. So if you want to declare an integer variables, you have int space int, the prefix data type, and the name of the variable is counter. So int counter, or you can declare variable and also initialize them. Okay, so int max equals 100, something like that. If you want to declare constant, you can declare constant like this way. You write the keyword const followed by the data type, let's say decimal type of constant siya, then the decimal prefix. And I advise, when you declare constant, make sure na ang constant variable nyo lahat capital letter para madali nyo ma-recognize na this one pala is a constant variable, para hindi kayo malito gamitin siya. Okay, so yun. And the value of that particular variable, this one is what you call yung letter M, is the format. Okay, so later explore natin siya. Okay, so already discussed the data type. So the common types of variables in constant, so madalas itong gamitin string, integer, and decimal. Okay, so guidelines: data used in calculation must be numeric. So kung numeric siya, it can be decimal, so fractions, integer for whole numbers, and float or double for scientific applications. Okay, kasi medyo maraming digits. So yung precision ng digits na up to 6 characters or up to 6 digits, yung precision ng decimal point. Okay, so string, so including when you allow the user to input data, consider the type of data. For example, if the user requires to input phone number that has special characters, assign them with string. Okay, using string. Okay, naming rules. It may contain letters, digits, and underscore. Must begin with the letter. Cannot contain space or period. Okay, so please always remember this. And make sure they are descriptive. Hindi ko lang na-add. Okay, it cannot be reserved words. And variables in C#, like C++, they are case sensitive. So therefore, the sum integer with capital I is different with sum integer with capital S and I, something like that. So please take note of that. Should follow naming conventions. Okay, identifier must be meaningful. Ito na. You should, when you declare variables and assign name to them, it should clearly identify or indicate the purpose. Do not abbreviate. Okay, do not use X and Y unless you are using the X and Y axis. But X and Y, if you have large amount of data, or let's say multiple lines of code that requires you to debug, it's really hard to find where the error came from if your variable is not descriptive enough. Kasi it's really hard to recognize din kung saan ka magde-debug pagka ganun. include the class data type. Let's say, for example, when you create variable pay rate, use the class data type like decimal pay rate, something like that. So, pay rate, something like that. So, para recognize mo kung anong klaseng data type yung hahawakan ng variable na ginagamit mo. Para hindi ka balik ng balik sa task na nung nag-declare ka. Something like that. Okay. Our suggestion is to use camel casing. Pag sinabing camel casing, yung first word ay small case, yung first letter niya. Pero yung second, third, and so on words, yung first letter nun is mga capital letter. Kagaya nito. This is a camel case. Pero depende sa depende sa tawag dito. Since case sensitive siya, so I suggest camel casing or normal case, yung capital letters lahat ng first letter, something like that. Use uppercase for constants para na-recognize mo na ordinary variable siya between constant variables. Okay? And separate words with underscore. Okay? So, constants provides way to use words to describe value that doesn't change. So, we have two types. The intrinsic, so it's built into an environment. So, we will be not defining this anymore. And we have name constant, meaning kayo ang magde-define. Pag sinabing intrinsic naman, naka-define na sa C#, kung ano talagang particular the variable siya at ano magiging laman niya. So built-in siya. Pag sinabing name constant, kayo ang magde-describe, kayo ang gagawa ng sarili niyong constant variable. So in order to declare constant variable, you declare them using const keyword. Okay, just like what I presented a while ago sa example, merong const na keyword. Let's look for it. Okay, ito siya. So, this one is a constant variable. Okay, so let's scroll down. Assign name, data type, and value. So, when you declare constant, you should assign name, data type, and value. Since constant siya, it's required to have a value. Constant value cannot be changed during project execution. And data type declared, and the data type declared and the type of value must be matched. Okay, so pag integer siya, make sure integer din yung laman niya. Okay? So there are two advantages why we use constant, but it's not all the time gagamit tayo ng constant. Kailan natin siya gagamitin? Okay. Number one, kung madalas mo siyang papalitan. Let's say for example, nag-declare ka ng price or tax rate. So sometimes, you need to declare that as a constant, since hindi naman siya napapalitan kasi hindi naman siya in-input ng user. So, yung mga ordinary variables, ginagawa natin siyang ordinary variables kasi from time to time, during the execution of the program, napapalitan yung value niya. Pero yung constants, hindi. Okay? So, constants are easier to read since naka-capital letter siya. So, and more meaningful. Okay? Bakit more meaningful? Kasi mas na-recognize natin yung purpose niya kesa doon sa value lang. For example, maximum pay is more meaningful than 1,000, di ba? Kasi mas mahirap ma-recognize yung data pag puro digits nakikita mo, unlike kung mayroong variable, alam mo yung purpose niya. So, to change the value, change constant declaration once, not every reference in your code. So, when you use constant and you use them into multiple line of your codes, isang beses ka lang magpapalit ng value. Affected na yung ibang parts ng program mo. So, no need to identify the line that you use that variable tapos papalitan mo. So, that's the purpose of using constant. If you need to have value that doesn't change frequently, so and you use them throughout your program, use constant. Otherwise, if the data or the variable requires to change its value every time depending on the user needs, use ordinary variable. So if you want to create a constant, you declare the constant like this way: constant, the data type, and the identifier, meaning the constant name and the value. So example, kagaya nito, you can declare string and any data type or type of you can assign any data type that you want. Depending on the availability ng language ko, ano meron siyang data type na mention ko sa taas. Okay? Okay, so when you assign values to constant, so it may contain only digits 0 to 9. It can contain decimal point, or it can contain the positive or negative sign. So, type declaration character at the right side. This is optional but recommended siya kasi mas nade-define natin kung anong klaseng data siya. So, cannot contain comma. Pag ang value ng constant nyo na numeric ay may comma, hindi na siya number, string na siya kasi may special characters na. Cannot contain comma, dollar sign, or any symbol, monetary symbols. So, any other special characters. Okay. Use type declaration character to specify the data type. Without type declaration character, whole numbers assumed to be integer. So, when you declare constant variables that has decimal points, you have to include a type declaration. So, what are the types declarations? We have decimal. For decimal, if you are declaring a constant variable with a decimal value assigned to it as constant value, you need to include a character M or small m for decimal, for double D, for long L, for short S, for float F. That's why in my example, meron ako nakalagay na declaration character to indicate that the value of this constant is decimal or etc. So if you want to declare a constant variable for strings, enclose them in quotes, double quotes. It can contain letters, digits, and special characters since string siya. To include a quotation mark within literal, precede the quotation mark with backslash. For example, kung yung string na yon sa loob nun, kailangan yung i-display na meron siyang double quotation, mag-a-apply ka ng escape character na backslash para ma-escape yung character. For example, we have a string here, he said, comma. So, parang kinukot mo yung isang line na sinabi niya. Kasi when you don't include the escape character slash, what will happen is, this particular quote here will become the closing quotation for this one. So, magkakaroon ka na ngayon ng error kasi ito, yung word na yung line na I like it, parang wala siyang opening quotes. So, kaya, magkakaroon ng error sa program mo. So, that's why you need to include escape character like this one. Okay? Okay, example of constant. Notice nyo, when you declare float variable data type, or when you use float data type in constant, meron siya nakalagay na letter F to indicate that this value here is a float type constant. Decimal, M, you can use small case if you want. For double, letter D. For long, letter L. For string, double quotation. Okay? So, meron tayong tinatawag na intrinsic constant, meaning built-in na siya. For example, if you want to use a value that is intrinsic, meron tayong example like yung built-in color, how to embed color in your program, or change the color of your text box during runtime. Meron tayong tinatawag na color constant variable doon. Then you try to add the dot to indicate the color of the particular for color or background color, something like that. So, declaring const or variables, so you need to declare data type first, followed by the identifier. Okay. Now, I think you're already familiar with this one. So, let's have some demonstration. So, let me demonstrate how you can declare the program or the variables that I have mentioned. I have mentioned a while ago. Okay. So, I'm going to open the program I made. So, in this particular example, we need to embed a code in order to allow the program perform its task to calculate and display result. Okay. Okay, wait lang ha. Open natin. Then we will continue discussion from next. Okay, okay lang natin. Okay, so we have here a program. Wait lang. Okay, nakikita na po ba yung program? Nakikita na ba?
Yes po.
Okay. So, hindi ko na siya ma-zoom. So, yun na yung talagang size niya. Now, in this particular interface, we have, by the way, I will not demonstrate anymore how to add the text boxes, ha? Kasi na-discuss na natin siya from previous module. So, in this example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 text boxes. Now, the difference between this text box and these 3 text boxes here for subtotal, tax, and total, these 3 text boxes here are all read only. Since the purpose of this text box is to display result, so I don't want the user to modify the result when the result is displayed. So that's why I set the property of this text boxes to read only. Para hindi na siya modified, hindi siya ma-modify. Kasi baka mamaya, when the user use this program and try to perform calculation, hindi niya gusto yung result, ginawa niyang 0. So, that's the purpose of making this text box read only. Automatically, they will be parang grayed out sa screen. Or, much better, if you want, you can use label instead para hindi na kayo mag read only ng mga text boxes. Okay? So, yun. So, in this particular setup, I have the price, the quantity. I have 2 buttons that performs calculation and clears the contents of these text boxes for new data or for new inputs. Okay, so let's try to run. Okay. So this program has this one. Okay, ito yung output niya. So wala pa tong code. So for example, input tayo ng data. Let's say Colgate. Okay. 100 ml. So, price, let's say for example, 87. Okay, quantity, 2. So, when they usually click the button compute, so automatically, we will be expecting that the program will calculate and display the result in this particular text boxes. So, notice when I highlight that and try to type anything in my keyboard, hindi na siya napapalitan because it is read only. That's the purpose of setting this text box read only, to make a rule that the user should not modify any output displayed by the program. Okay? Kasi magiging bug yan sa program mo pag na-modify yung result. Okay? Now, let's start writing code for this program. So, to start writing code for this program, since the purpose of this button is to calculate, doon natin i-double-click yung ating mouse. So, double-click. Something like that. Okay? Now, when you accidentally double-click any control from your form, let's say for example, while doing some design, na-double-click nyo siya, kagaya na to. Double-click, ayan. And, since wala pa naman siyang purpose, by the way, zoom in ko ha. Okay, okay na po ba? Nakikita na?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Magkakaroon tayo ng problema kung gusto mong tanggalin siya. Okay? Kung tatanggalin mo siya, make sure mag-i-start ka doon sa private keyword hanggang sa closing bracket niya. Kasi pair yun parate. Ang tawag natin dito is method. Okay? So, pag in-erase mo yan, okay lang. Pero pag nirun mo siya, sometimes hindi siya nagkakaroon ng success rate to run. Nagkakaroon siya ng failed. Why? Kasi nakapag-generate ka ng method sa kanya, kagaya nito. Magkakaroon ng error. Sasabihin niya, may nawawalang statement. Ayan. So, does not contain definition for load kasi tinanggal ko siya. Ang gagawin nyo dapat, pupuntahan nyo siya. Puntahan nyo sa double-click nyo yung error na yon. Double-click. Ngayon, hanapin yung error, tanggalin nyo siya. Since tinanggal niyo yung code kanina, tatanggalin nyo rin ito. Kasi ibig sabihin, may minilagay ka na line doon sa code mo. Eventually, tinanggal mo din. So, ang ginawa mo, gagawin natin, tanggalin mo siya. Ayan. para mawala yung error. Okay? So, refresh. Okay, run mo siya ulit. Wala na yung error at successfully mabibuild na yung program. Okay? Gets? Gets?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
okay. Saan natin madalas, okay, i-zoom out ko lang ha. Okay. So, this is the typical structure of C# code window. So, ignore nyo lang muna to kasi medyo marami. By the way, parang C++ siya, may mga built-in include headers. So, hide nyo lang siya. Okay. Ngayon, in C# code window, marami tayong makikita. The import, yung using, para ma-import yung library na kailangan natin for this program. Automatic generated na siya. Pangalawa, namespace. Namespace is the name of your project. So, I name my project week 7. So, it has a pair of curly brace. Inside that namespace is the form. Okay. Pangalawang form ko is ABC form. May pair of curly braces din siya. So, yung code nyo, ilalagay nyo sa loob ng form class nyo. We call this class. Okay. Dito sa loob. Okay. So, yun. Huwag na huwag nyo itong tatanggalin. So, ito, simula dito hanggang sa taas, huwag tatanggalin. At yung pinakahuling dalawang curly brace, huwag na huwag nyo siyang tatanggalin. Kasi masisira ang program nyo. Ano po? Ngayon, kung magde-declare kayo ng variable, kung local variable, dito nyo siya ilalagay sa button. Kasi local variable siya. Okay? So, if you want to declare a variable, first you need to type the data type. For example, I want to declare the variables for my, let's say, since hindi ko naman kailangang i-manipulate yung product name, so you need to declare variable for it. Kasi pag nag-declare ka ng variable, nag-allocate ka ng space sa memory. So, what I need is the variables for the price and for quantity. So, declare tayo. So, int, decimal, di ba? Decimal, the prefix, price. Or you can just put item price. This is camel case. Capital letter yung second word, yung first letter niya. Okay? Pwede nyo initialize kung gusto nyo. Since decimal siya, so D, something like that. Okay? Pwede namang wala. Walang problema yun. Okay? So, int, since they are different types, so magkaiba yung declaration ko. So, int quantity. So notice, my variable is descriptive. It actually named after its purpose. Kung anong purpose niya, yun ang ilagay yung pangalan niya. Okay, wag lang masyadong mahaba yung pangalan. Okay? Now, what is the purpose of naming my variable properly? The purpose of that is your Visual Studio has what we call features, what we call IntelliSense. When you write the variable name, ganyan, it automatically recognize your variable. So, no need to type it from the end characters. All you have to do is to click the variable name, automatic na fill up na siya. That's what you call IntelliSense. Okay? That's why in our previous activity, I give an instruction that when you name the text box, always name the text box with prefix letters like txt, lbn. Let me go back to the design first. Okay. In this particular window or design view, my text boxes is named after its purpose also. Like for example, this text box here is named txt price. For example, this one is named txt price. So since this one is a text box, so I include txt prefix so that when I write the first characters of the name of the text box, IntelliSense or Visual Studio can easily detect, this one pala is the line that you are going to type. So please select the things that you need to use. So, parang ganito siya, di ba? So it's easier for me to identify what particular text box I need to include in my code. Kasi when you just add text box and leave the default name at is, sino sa text box 1? Sino sa text box 2? Sino sa text box 3? Malilito ka. So when you assign a proper naming, it allows you to identify your text box correctly when you write your code. Malinaw po ba? Malinaw?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good.
Yes, sir.
Now, okay lang na wag muna kayo mag-declare ng kahit anong variable. Kasi kailangan nyo lang. Okay? So, let's put some comments. So, this is how you put comments, // Okay? Or you can put multiple line comments. Automatic na ano na siya. Okay. By the way, hindi siya na-close. Okay, wait lang. Okay, so yun, multiple line comments. So, declare, ano lang, isang line lang siguro. Declare local variables. Sometimes, ang ginagawa ko, Bicol. Okay, depende. Para sa price ng item. Parang ganon. Para readable siya. Kung meron mang kaklase nyo na gustong malaman kung paano nyo ginawang program, lagyan nyo ng comment. For quantity input. Medyo matrabaho lang siya, but it's part of documenting the program, di ba? So, documentation allows you to understand the purpose of the statement that you have written in your program. Okay. Now, let's go back to the module. So, that's how you declare. By the way, how do we declare constant? Normally, constant, in practice, dinideclare natin siya sa class level. This is what you call class level. This is what you call local level. Ibig sabihin ng local level, sa loob ng procedure or method mo siya dinideclare. Local level siya. Pag class level, sa taas. Just below the initialization method. So, sa baba siya. So, declare const. Okay. The data type. Okay. Small d Then, the name of the variable. So, decimal, capital letter, tax, underscore, rate, equals, let's say, 0.10. Pwede nga yan. Decimal siya, so D. Something like that. Okay? Oh, meron tayo. Double float decision. Tingnan natin so ano. Character. Di ba D yun? Float siya. Lagyan natin. Hinahanap siya as ano. Tanggalin natin. Okay. Alam nyo i-accept. So, dapat float daw siya. Anyway, ang float kasi is hindi naman ganun kadaming digits. So, siguro pwedeng i-accept natin as float siya or depende sa inyo. Okay, balikan natin. Mukhang float ata talaga yung ano, na-declare ko. Balikan natin yung module. Decimal is M. Sorry man. Okay, decimal is M. Okay. So yun. So, 0.10. Pwedeng 0.10. Bahala kayo. Walang 0. Okay lang din. So yun. Now, that's how you declare constant. So, when you declare constant, lagyan nyo lang ng comment. So, constant variable. Okay. Then define your purpose. Kung anong purpose niya. Okay. So yun. Okay. Next proceed to the lesson. Okay. Ngayon, okay na tayo, no? So let's move forward. So, initialization. Initializing numeric data. Okay. Now, scope and lifetime of variables. When you say scope, hanggang saan visible si variable. Example. In this particular example, this is a local variable. This particular variable here is visible only inside this curly brace. After that, if you want to access decimal price, hindi na siya recognizable. Diba? So, visible lang siya doon sa loob ng curly brace, while the constant variable is visible outside or inside of any method inside the class declaration. So, kahit dito ma-recognize natin si decimal, tax rate. Dapat pala gamitin natin doon sa gamitin natin sa loob ng method. Okay, kung may method ka pa na isa, recognizable siya. So, dito, recognizable din siya. Di ba? Recognizable siya. If you have other procedure here, for example, let's say, declare tayo na ibang procedure. Private, void, hello. So yung class, kahit dito recognizable siya kasi nasa class declaration siya. So decimal, okay, ayun na siya, tax rate. Pero yung decimal price, hindi mo na siya ma-recognize. Kasi nga, their visibility is possible only doon lang kung saang block mo siya dineclare. Kagaya to, this is declared inside this curly braces, so hanggang doon lang lifespan niya. Okay? So let's proceed. So we have visibility means this variable can be used or seen in a particular location. So we have scope levels, we have namespace, class level, local level, or block level variable type. Okay, pag sinabing namespace, we are talking about this one. This is the namespace. Ibig sabihin, kung meron ako mga ibang forms pa, pwede kong ma-access yung mga variables na yun kung naka-declare siya via namespace variable. Pero saka na natin yung pag-uusapan pag meron na tayong mga multiple forms. Ngayon, yung class level, I already discussed this one. Dire-declare siya sa taas, at top portion ng ating inside the class declaration sa loob. So I suggest na after na lang ng public declaration, so just above the private void, so dito sa gitna, okay, sa middle. Pag local variable, a local variable is declared inside a certain method, kagaya ito. Ang block level variable, example, you have an if condition. So if something like that, and you have a condition. Kung meron kang variable dito, let's say int y, something like that, yung lifespan naman nito hanggang dito lang sa block na to. Okay, that's the difference. We have a class level, a local level, a class level, local level can be accessed inside the block. Okay, a class level variable can be accessed inside a different set of methods, this one and this one. A local level can be accessed its own local declaration and the block level, while the block level variable can only be accessed and visible inside a certain block where it is being declared. Okay, hanggang doon lang i-use niya. So example dito, access natin si y equals, wala na siya, di ba? So that's the type of visibility and lifespan ng variables. Okay? Clear? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the scope determined by where the variable is declared. So yun, na-mention ko na. So lifetime of a variable is period of time that the variable exists. So local or block variable, one execution of a method. Ibig sabihin, yung local variable and block variable, hanggang dito lang sa execution ng button na to. After executing the button, natapos siya sa mag-process, patay na yung variable mo sa memory. Wala na siya. Remove na siya. While yung class, hanggat hindi mo nako-close yung program mo, present pa rin siya. Okay? Yung block level naman, after ma-execute yung if statement na ginawa ko kanina, after ng close brace niya, wala na din yung variable mo sa memory. Nakikreate lang siya pag dineclare mo sa block, hanggang block ang lifespan niya. Okay? Okay, yun. So, local declaration, discuss na natin. Okay, so ito na nga. So, this is where your class variable in constant is being declared. Local variables. Okay. Okay, namespace level variables in constants are used when project has multiple forms and or other classes. Ayun. Siguro, next na. Okay, calculation. In programming, you can perform calculations. So, madalas yun. So, converting string to numeric data type. Okay, let me demonstrate why do we need to use this one. Okay. For example, okay, in our program, the user will input the product name, the price, and quantity. So now, we will be performing calculation. But before we proceed to any calculation, we must first get the value of this input coming from the user. So, that's the purpose of naming your text box properly, so that we can identify where the input came from. So this one is the XT price. So therefore, if I want to get the input for decimal price, I need to call the text box that hold that input. So therefore, I need to type txt and price. Notice, that's the purpose of using the prefix kasi madali siyang nalalaman ng IntelliSense. Then, after writing the name of the text box, you include the dot text, meaning you are getting the data coming from those text box. You identify the property text. Okay, so that's the purpose of that. Okay, now, after typing those statements, notice what happened. So this is an error. Why? Because you have an incompatible type here. Since this is a text box, this will handle string. Even if you type numbers in the text box, still text box treat that input as a string, while this one is numeric. So they are incompatible. So in order to allow your decimal price to hold the value coming from text box, you need to convert the value of text box into a data type that is acceptable by this variable, and that data type is called decimal. That's the reason why we need to convert our data. So in order to do that, we will be using parse method. The parse method is a text property of control to numeric. So it converts text property of control to numeric value that can be used in calculation. So every time you need to get the data coming from your text box, you need to use the parse method. But you need to take consideration of the type of data this variable holds. Example, if the variable is decimal, you need to use decimal.parse. Or if the variable is the integer, you need to use int.parse. Or if other type, let's say Boolean, so you need to also use to bool.parse. No need to convert string kasi since string na siya, so no need to use parse anymore. So let's have some examples. So in order to do that, you need to type the variable name and you need to include int.parse. Enclose them in the parentheses. So let's try in our program demonstration. To do that, you need to type small cases ng int.parse. Notice, our Visual Studio already detected the next choice that you need to choose, like parse. So double click and you need to type or enclose the text box inside the parentheses of the parse method. Notice our C#, our Visual Studio now accepting our statement. Let's try to display if we really get or check if we really get the value coming from the text box. So I'm going to use the breakpoint feature of this IDE. So I'm going to create a breakpoint here. So breakpoint allows your Visual Studio to stop executing on that particular point of statement. So I will going to click here. It will create a mark of stop mark, something like that. So let's start running the program. Okay, and we'll be putting some inputs. Okay, ito na yung program natin. So let's say for example Colgate. But anyway, kahit di kayo maglagay ng di kayo maglagay ng product name, okay lang. So price, let's say 1,000, something like that. So compute. Notice, my Visual Studio stop executing in this line. So this one, when I hover the mouse, I can easily detect, is this text box contains the value that I expecting? Yes, because this text box contains 1,000. But notice the value of the text box. It has double quotation in it. And after executing the line, so I'm going to click my mouse, hover my mouse at the standard toolbar and go to step over, so or step into or press F11 to execute this statement. So let's try. By the way, aside from that, when you will be noticing a window just below your IDE. So we have this auto. It will contains or list the variables of your program. Like this one, di ba? So decimal as of now, price is 0 since hindi pa siya nararun, and the txt price contains 1,000. So let's press F11 or step into to execute this statement. Okay, F11. Notice my program is now finished executing this line. Notice what happened to my variable. It now has a value of 1,000. Okay? So meaning my statement is actually working. It gets or retrieves the value coming from the text box txt price. Okay, so now the next thing that I need to do is to write the second statement to get the quantity coming from the user. Okay, equals, by the way, palitan natin yung int kasi decimal pala siya. Sorry. So, this would be decimal. Okay, nagkamali lang tayo. So this would be in that parse txt quantity. So you just need to write or press tab keyboard on your keyboard para automatic ma-fill na siya. Okay, tab and close, semicolon. Take note, statement in C# always ends with semicolon. Okay. Now, okay na, no? So let's proceed with our next discussion. Okay, parse. Okay, string. Later, balikan natin yung string. Balikan natin siya. Perform calculation. So, in C#, we have 5. So, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and the last one is the modulus. That is for remainder. Okay. Modulus allows us to get the remainder of a division operation. For example, we have a value of int total minus to 150 % 60, so the answer will be 30 because when you divide 150 by 60 it equals to 2 with the remainder of 30. So therefore the value of this one will be 30. Now take note, when you use modulus, expect that the result is always integer. Okay, for division, okay, I think you already know that. So division operator can be used to divide fractional values or integers. The operation depends on the data types of the operands. If at least one of the operand is fraction, the result will be fractional. Meaning, kung ang isang operand ay merong decimal point, automatic ang output niya decimal point. However, if you divide one integer value by another, C# will truncate or drop. Parang madidemote siya. Any fractional result and produce integer result. So the result of this statement here, our operator now, operand is 60, which is integer. The result will be 2, will be integer since wala siyang decimal point. But if you convert that to decimal point, automatic it will contain decimal point in the result. So it has a big difference or impact in your program if you are not careful of using those operators kasi magkakaroon difference sa decimal point. Okay? So for exponentiation, you can use the math class, the math.pow, if you want to use the or calculate the exponent of a certain numeric data. Okay? Now, let's try calculating our program. Okay, now, order of operations. So this is very important. So in operation, if there are expression that has mixed operation, so the operation that will perform or evaluate first are those inside the parentheses, followed by multiplication and division. Remember, multiplication and division, hindi dito also yung PEMDAS. Kasi multiplication and division have the same level. But they are executed from left to right. Okay? So if there are multiplications and division on an expression, if the multiplication is written first, then multiplication is being evaluated first. Depende. The evaluation is left to right. If they don't have any parentheses, therefore the execution is left to right. Followed by modulus and followed by addition and subtraction. So therefore, addition and subtraction has the same level of operation or hierarchy. So walang rango sa kanilang dalawa. So they are both equal. But the execution is left to right. Okay, so meron tayong discussion dito, basahin na lang. Ano po? So, let us demonstrate operation in our program. So, ngayon, I will be calculating the total. So, gagawa lang kayo ng variable, may suggestion, pag kailangan nyo na. So, decimal, let's say, sub, decimal, sub, total, something like that. So, copy natin siya, perform calculation, equals, decimal price, multiplied by in quantity. So, tab. So, it's really easier for me to write a statement because IntelliSense provide suggestions. Okay. Now, let's create or compute the tax. So, decimal, tax, decimal, okay. Something like that. Oops. Decimal. Okay. When you write your variables, ignore nyo lang yung underline na green kasi pag green siya, ibig sabihin, they are not used yet. Okay? But if you encountered red, something like this, ganyan, red, which means syntax error siya. So, when you hover the mouse, you will be viewing the suggestion. So, expected, dapat daw may semicolon, something like that. So, in-expect kasi na ang variable dapat walang space. So, iniisip ng C# compiler nyo, they are different variables. Ano po? So, yun. Ganun. Okay. Ngayon, gawa tayo ng decimal tax. Okay. And then, kunin natin yung subtotal, that is extracting the tax from a subtotal, multiplied decimal tax rate. I'm using the I am accessing the constant. Diba? So, yun. Okay. Ngayon, okay na, no? Ngayon, let's try displaying the result of this variable to our text box. Now, we will be doing the reverse method. A while ago, we displayed or we retrieved the data coming from text box and assigned it to our variable. But this time, we will be displaying the contents of our variable to the text box. So therefore, we need to type first. So this is display data. Okay. Now, we need to type first the text box, txt, the subtotal. We need to call the .text property so that the value will be displayed in the text box. And we need to call the variable, decimal subtotal, something like that. Okay? Now, we'll be encountering the same problem again. Right now, our data is not compatible with the text box because text box is string while this one is numeric, and that's the reason why we need to convert this. So how do we convert that? If we go back to our module, okay, you will be reading some statements about converting to integer. Nasaan ba yun? Okay, converting to string. Okay, so this is how you convert your numeric data to string so that it will match the type of the text box. So we need to enclose our variable with a .string property. So when you assign a value to a variable, you must take care to assign like types. So they are unlike types. So dapat ma-convert. For example, you assign an integer value to an int variable in decimal value to a decimal variable. Any value that you assign to a string variable or text property of a control must be string. Since this is numeric, so we need to convert that to string. You can convert any of numeric data types to string value using toString method. So let's demonstrate that. So that to string. Okay? Something like that. By the way, we need to enclose with parentheses. Okay, now let's try running the program and let's see what happened. Okay. Okay, so I will be inputting 100 here as price. Quantity is 2. So we'll be expecting the outcome of the subtotal will be 200. Okay, so now, okay na siya. Okay, question so far? Question so far? Notice, I called the text box txt subtotal. That's why the result is displayed here. If you call the wrong text box, so therefore, this 200 will also be displayed to that particular text box that you called. Example, that's why you need to name your text box properly. Baka magkamali kayo. Let's say label 1. Hanapin natin si label 1. Okay, then ako label 1. O, ngayon, hanapin natin kung saan lalabas. Okay, 102. Okay, notice nyo dito sa lumabas kasi ito yung label 1. Okay, so please be careful of calling the control. Kasi kung ano nilagay nyo doon din siya lalabas, di ba? So, yun. At least, nakafamiliar na kayo. So, it's really important to name the control that you will be using throughout the course of your program. Kagaya ng mga text box or control na to. This one, this one, this one, this one, and those 3 result text boxes. Okay? Name them. Unlike this one, hindi ko sa pinangalanan kasi for label purpose lang siya. So, wala naman siyang purpose sa code ko. That's why hindi ko siya pinangalanan. Pero itong mga to, may mga pangalan siya na naka-assign. Okay? Okay. So, let's proceed to our... Okay. So, operators, ano pa ba? Calculation. So, you can perform calculations like this one. Basahin nyo na lang po siya. Okay. Assignment operation. Ginawa na natin kanina. This one is the shortcut of assigning or parang accumulation siya. Converting between numeric data types. So, implicit conversion meaning automatic C# convert. Like say for example, you have integer and you are going to assign a value into a long or float or double data type. Automatic convert niya. Okay? Let's say integer variable siya, i-assign mo sa double data type na variable, pwede. Hindi ka magkakaroon ng problema kasi implicit conversion siya. Pero gagawin mo is explicit conversion kung hindi allow kay C# i-convert yung incompatible na types. Let's say for example, if you look at this example, the float cannot be converted to decimal. That's why you need to perform explicit conversion. So, this is what you call explicit conversion. You are converting the float to decimal so that it will become allowed for decimal number to store the value coming from this variable. Okay? That is explicit. Meaning, manual mo siyang i-convert. Okay? Kagaya ng parse, di ba? Pero yung implicit, automatic na siya. Okay? Bahala na si C#. Okay. Convert class method. So, to decimal. You can also use convert if you want. Instead of parse, you can use convert to decimal, convert that to int 32, something like that. The difference between 32 and 64, integer yung 32, long yung 64. Okay? This one. So, convert. Instead of using parse, you can use convert method. Okay? So, yun. Okay. So, rounding numbers, madali lang to. Just round off. Okay? The numbers for each decimal. Here is decimal. Okay? Okay, now, formatting. Now, what if we want to format our output onto our text box? So, for example, let's try another demonstration. Okay, what's the purpose of formatting output? Let me demonstrate so that you can identify what is the reason why you need to format. Okay naman yung resulta, bakit kailangan pa format? Let's say we have a price of 1,345.89 and quantity is 4. Calculate. Notice the output. So sometimes, it's really important to make the output readable or recognizable by the user. We need to put comma or we need to limit to decimal point, something like that. That's the purpose of format method. Okay? Now, wait lang ha? Okay. So how do we do that? So you need to apply that into our format string. So we have several format method. We have this one. So we have C for currency, automatic magkakaroon siya ng $sign or PHP, depende sa language ng computer. Kung naka-Philippines ang language niya, PHP yon. Pero kung naka-US, $sign. F for fixed point, N for numeric, and D for digits, and P for percent. Automatic convert siya. How do we use them? if you have a value of 1,125.6744, if you use C, magkakaroon siya ng $sign at comma doon sa 1,000. Something like that. So, kagaya ng numeric, meron tayo dito another value, naglagay siya ng N, nagkaroon ng comma. Okay? Pero kung masyadong maraming decimal point, pwede mong bawasan, like N0. Ibig sabihin, tatanggal mo, i-omit mo yung decimal point. Pero, kung tatanggalin mo yung decimal point, automatic, i-round off niya yun. Parang magdi-demote or mapopromote yung value niya. Pero, take note, when you use string formatting, yung value mo na integer, decimal, or numeric type, mako-convert siya into string. Hindi mo na siya pwedeng magamit ulit kasi na-display mo na siya as string kasi meron na siyang comma. Malinaw po. So, let's demonstrate that. Okay? So, I will put in N2. You can use small case if you want, something like that. Okay, so let's run this program. Let's see what will happen if we enclose a price with the decimal point. Okay, something like that. Tsambahan ko na lang ha. Okay, 2. Okay, so notice, I have now, dagdagan natin yung presyo. Yeah, compute. So, we have comma and decimal point. For currency, automatic magiging PHP siya. Okay? Or $sign. Okay? So, yun. Okay, so that is string formatting. Okay. Choosing, you can also do that to other type. So, just read the modules. Okay. Output can display in labels or text boxes. When do we need to use labels? When do we need to use text box? So, if you want to display an output, use labels or you can use text box. Depende sa inyo. Kasi ang text box can be changed by the user. So, in order to use that, set read only. You can set tab property to false. So, this is a simple guide for you to be able to take consideration if you want to use labels or text box in your output, for output in your program. Okay? Now, okay, that's the end of my module. So, hopefully, nasundan nyo yung discussion. Any questions so far? Any questions so far?
Sir, naka-record po ito, sir.